All right, y'all. I'm back with another episode of the Guilty by Association podcast, and we're cheating. I told you guys if you listen to the prior episode, which you most definitely have to, because Freckles was there and she's back with me. We're just recording this on the same day, but we made it two episodes because you guys know the episodes can be too long, and then I have less work for the week after. But we're not telling this to anyone. So, Freckles, thank you for staying even longer and dedicating so much time to us. We stopped where you was talking about the experience you had with the refusenik at the
Yes.
university.
Yes. He was a very special man. And I'm not even sure he realizes that he had such an impact on me. But I never forgot him. And I appreciate first of all, his honorable way of living. I think he's a very honorable man. But I appreciate him as well for teaching me about my own history. Because without people like him, a lot of it would have been sort of lost, or I would have had to dig for myself, and that can take a really long time if you don't know where to look. So, he introduced me to people like Edward Said, his work, and just really rich history. But he also taught me how to think about the conflict in another way, and it's from a perspective that I hadn't entertained before because of my own religious upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to be Zionist and the evangelical community is to be a good Christian. And if I'm not a good Zionist, am I even a Christian at all? Is God still pleased with me? Will I suffer punishment for not supporting this? Does this mean that I don't support the Jewish people? There's all of these implications that are really fear based and fear driven. But this particular man gave me a sort of, I guess, permission to think
Yeah.
about these things. Yeah.
So was that were you actually aware of the word Zionist? Like, is that something you grew up with, or did you just learn it then, or like when did you come across?
I think it's not the word Zionist is more used outside of that community than inside of that
Hmm.
community. For them, it's just, do you support Israel? Do you love the Jewish people and do you support
My God,
Israel?
this
And
is
the two
such
are
a
mutually exclusive, right? Right. And I mean, a lot of it, people don't realize how much Zionist rhetoric and Zionist talking points have infiltrated the seminaries in the United States, and
mhm.
how so much of our liturgy and so much of our interpretation of what we call the Word of God is colored with Zionist perspectives.
Mhm, mhm.
And what does that do to people and their perception of who God is and how they view the world? I mean, it's so much deeper than that. While I was over there and while I met people like this professor, I was able to safely start to ask myself questions. That's always how it starts. Ask yourself questions. Do I think this is right? Do I agree with this? And then from there, you can start to paint a broader picture. Like, this is what my values are. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. And of course, while I was there, this is such a rich talking point. Like, we didn't just focus on Israel and Palestine. We were also learning about Iraq and about the Gulf and
Mm,
Iran.
mm.
There's so much history. So I didn't get to learn everything, but it was what cracked the foundation. And that was very important because once you crack it, once you pull a thread, the whole thing starts to come unraveled eventually. Yeah. Um, and I mean, learning about laws, these are laws on the books in Israel, or like official procedures, like we were speaking in the last episode about Yitzhak Rabin and how he's really touted in Israel as their progressive leader who wanted to make peace. You know, they don't tell you about the break their bones policy. Uh, you know, I believe it was during the first Intifada where they would uh, intentionally maim and break the bones of Palestinians, particularly young men, um, kids who they deem to be quote unquote security threats. And as we said before, anyone who says anything that is not in accordance with the state and can be viewed as a threat to the state, if you say something you don't like about the state, well, that could make you a security threat. You know, what makes a terrorist? And then that gives them the right to break your bones and to maim you. And it's one thing to hear it, but it's another thing to see it.
Yes.
And to be confronted with that and what that looks like. And I remember the moment, it was a specific moment in my life that I started to change the way I felt. It wasn't just a few things where I was like, okay, well, they're a little racist. Okay, well, I didn't really like what that person said. Well, I feel a little this way. No, this was a moment in my life where I was like, you know what? I don't think that these, and by these, I mean Zionists, Israelis, right? These are not my people, and I do not support this anymore. And it was the day I was walking out of the university, and there was a Palestinian man. He was older, looked to be about maybe in his late 50s or so, and probably was a young man during Rabin's break their bones policy. And I remember him standing in the middle of the sidewalk, and he had on, his clothes were all worn and dirty, and his ankles and his feet, his lower legs, everything, it was so mangled in the most unnatural way. And I mean, his legs were completely turned, like his feet were completely turned out, and there were parts that were like sort of bulbous, almost like they had been smashed with a mallet. That's what it looked like. And it absolutely ripped my heart out to see a human being like that. And he looked so, just the look on his face was so defeated and hopeless. He was begging to be seen that day, and everyone walked past him like he was not even there. He was a ghost. They saw through him. And it ripped my heart out. I think of him every single day. To this day, I still think about him, and I pray he's still alive. But I thought, oh my God, that's all I could say. When I walked up to him, I stopped and I looked at him, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I just immediately grabbed my wallet and gave him what was in the wallet. I think it was about 100 shekel. And when he saw them, like how much I had given him, if I had more, I wanted to give him everything I had. It broke my heart so much. But when he saw that, he just immediately broke down and started sobbing. And he walked closer to me, and he laid his head on my shoulder, and he just cried and cried, like a real release. And this is really important because, especially for an older Palestinian man to hug a young woman like that, it's not something that's usually done. It's a very modest society, very moral society, very honorable. So this was a moment where I knew how badly he was craving just comfort and human connection, and to be seen and to feel something other than hopelessness.
100%, yeah.
And it ripped my heart out. And I don't know how long we stood there. It felt like a long time that we just stood there embracing on the sidewalk. And then he eventually left. You know, he walked over to wherever his next destination was, because I think he needed to be able to make some money to feed his family. And I continued on to my bus stop, which was only a few feet away, and there was an Israeli man, a student at the university, Ashkenazi, and he had been watching that. He was watching. I didn't realize it till we got on the bus. And he came up to me and he said, "Excuse me, miss, I'm not starting with you. Like, I'm not flirting. I'm not hitting on you. I wanted to tell you that was very beautiful. I saw what you did."
Oh, for real? I thought he was going to attack you for that.
No, he said, "I want you to know that was a very beautiful thing. Very beautiful." And then he went to his seat, and that was it. So it's interesting to know that there are people like him who are clearly, they see what's going on. They see what's going on, and it wounds them, but Why didn't he get up and do it?
That's
Why
what I
didn't he
was
go to him?
thinking. It would have been
Right.
more beautiful if it came from him.
Exactly. Exactly. But in that moment, when I was looking at him and he was looking at me, the Palestinian man, I remember thinking, like, I'm looking at myself. I am him. He is me. And it was the same experience that I had with the Palestinian soldier on the base. I am him and he is me. Because if I had been born there and not here, there would be no difference in the way we were living.
I want to make it even, like, my thought was a little bit worse. I was
Mm,
like, this could have been your dad.
right. No, it's true. It's true. And I thought of that when I was standing with him. I'm like, this is my dad. This is my grandfather.
Yeah,
This is my uncle.
yeah, 100%.
And God only knows what happened to them. I'm still looking for him now. But yeah, that absolutely devastated me. And these procedures, they didn't just die with Rabin or whoever, the last prime minister. No, no. We see it even today with the shoot to maim policies and procedures that the IOF uses against Palestinians during the Great March of Return, the way that they would just nonchalantly shoot at anyone, women, children, young men, old men, doesn't matter. And this is a way to quell or to calm a already peaceful protest. And it angers me to see these things because I remember being on the bases with these people, these soldiers who looked me right in my face and lied to me and gave me this sob story about how it's not easy for them the way it's easy for the United States, and the US Marines can just shoot and kill anyone who makes them feel threatened, but the poor Israelis, we can't do that because the international stage will drag us. We'll be dragged on the international stage by all these countries who say we're terrorists, and they're coming at us with rocks and they could kill us. And but then when you look at these stories that are actually happening, when you stop listening to what their mouths are saying and you watch what they're doing, that's not true at all. And the anger that I felt when knowing that these people that I'd made a relationship with lied to my face, I was so pissed. I had just to be completely raw. I was so pissed.
Yeah.
And the more I learned, because it's a process, right? You pull one thread, then you pull another thread, and the deeper and deeper you go, and the more disgusting and nefarious the pit becomes, the more angry I become because I'm like, you all lied to me. And then it makes add the fact that my family is still riding this train and they think I'm the crazy one because I'm saying all of these things that they just can't bear to hear, which is that Palestine should be free and that Israel is a settler colony that does not have a right to exist.
Are you talking about now, saying that back then?
Now, saying it now, even now, after the deconstruction has pretty much happened, right? I am fiercely pro-Palestine. I do not support the state of Israel. I do not think that they have a right to exist. I think that they're a settler colony and that Palestine should be free. Now, doesn't mean that everyone has to leave, but it needs to be a free Palestine. It is Palestine. And that saying those things to my mother and my grandmother, the anger, the last conversation I had with my grandmother was a very angry one. And it ended with her screaming and yelling in my face that I wasn't Palestinian and that everything that she and my mother did was to protect me.
Insane.
Yes.
So tell me about the first time you told them free Palestine.
Sorry?
Tell me about the first time you told them your stand for free Palestine.
Um, well, it started when I bought a kufia and my mother saw it and was deeply uncomfortable. She was so uncomfortable with anything that was in any way Palestinian. And I would, well, actually, it has to start even before that. It started when I came back from Israel and I started telling them,
when
they
was
treated,
that about? Like like 10
yeah,
years, 5 years?
yeah, about 9 years ago. It was about 2015 when I came home.
Okay.
And I was not well. You could see pictures. I could show you pictures of myself when I came back. I am gaunt. I have these horrible bags under my eyes. I look almost like something had sucked the soul out of me. And I was extremely depressed. And my depression had started while I was there. I would stay in bed for days.
Wow.
I was prone to these bouts of extreme depression.
Mm-hmm.
And it carried on when I came home. And I would hint here and there, the Israelis treat Palestinians badly. They treated me badly. They treat Palestinians badly. You know what they do there. And I would bring these things up, and I could do, when you can feel all the air leave the room, you can feel someone's insides tightening.
Yeah.
And it's changed the subject, because something that exists in my family is an unwillingness to speak openly about the truth.
Yeah.
We like to tell our own version of the truth that's comfortable and shiny, happy people.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So they wouldn't engage in these conversations with me. And for a long time, I kept these things to myself, and I would just chew on it and chew on it and chew on it. And I was continuing to learn and continuing to evolve. And then it was after the 7th that these conversations, I think, on a macro scale, started to become more out in the open. More and more people started to talk about these things. And that's when I think I felt finally, because I was also in a rural area where I didn't have community. I'd been cut off from a lot of any Palestinian community at all. So I was very much alone in a vacuum. But it was after the 7th that I felt I felt confident in my voice to say, I know about this. I studied this. I lived this, and you need to wake up.
Yeah.
And essentially there was an unwillingness to wake up. And so now there's a divide, and I'm not speaking with a lot of members of my family right now, and have a very cool relationship with my mother to essentially keep the peace. But in terms of any serious conversation or deep connection, that's not there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that this is worlds apart,
Mm-hmm.
and this is very, very sad and very unfortunate, actually. Being pro-Palestinian seems to be very, very worlds apart from someone who is indoctrinated in that sense. And what I have to give your mom, though, is two things. Number one, that she did have some, I don't know if regrets would be the right word, probably not,
Mm-hmm.
because it's too much. But when she, talked about the brothers that been good to her, she was
Mm-hmm.
able to see that
Right.
despite everything. And then she felt like a little bit of a, guilty,
Mm-hmm.
guilt in terms of doing what she did. And
Yeah.
then there is the moment of when you told her he messaged me, and I expected her reaction to be completely different. I thought she was gonna be more hysteric and whatnot, but
Yeah.
for her to say, I knew it was coming,
Mm-hmm.
and it's up to you. I mean, of course, someone can say, well, that was just so because people know if they say no, then it becomes even more interesting, and you're gonna not listen and just
Mm-hmm.
you know so it could
Mm-hmm.
be, of course, it could be seen that way, but these two moments that stand out to me from what you told.
Yes, yes. It's a strange sort of contradiction there. And I think a lot of it is cognitive dissonance.
Mm.
And I think there's also a lot of turmoil when it comes to the religious part of it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
this, I don't, because when a lot of the footage was coming out of Gaza, I wanted to show her, like, this is what they're doing. I need you to understand
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
this is what is, you can't take pieces and parts of it. You have to take the whole thing.
Yeah.
This is Zionism. This is Israel. What's happening in Gaza is the bare, raw face of Zionism. And you need to know what you're supporting. You
Hmm.
need to know. And she refused to see it. She did not want to look at it. I remember when the babies were left out of their incubators, which deeply, deeply upset me, right? And I tried to show her the footage, because sometimes you need to
Hmm.
see it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
enough to hear it.
100%.
You have to see it.
A
And
hundred percent.
I remember she shook her head and she closed her eyes, and she just kept shaking her head no and closed her eyes. And I was like, Mom, we have to bear witness to what's happening in the world. We need to know the truth. And she would not. She would
But
not.
wouldn't you say this is I know the truth, but I don't want to know it, and I'm not accepting it?
Yes, that's what it feels like to me. That's what it feels like to me. And so I do, we are very much no contact in a lot of ways. I don't invite her into the inner circle of my life to protect myself. But I still keep the door open a bit because, of course, she's my mother. She gave me life. I love her. But I disagree with the ethnic cleansing part. And it is very much an erasure. Growing up, I wanted to know things like, what part of Palestine was his family from? Did you learn any Arabic? Did you learn any recipes? Did you learn any traditions, their dress, anything like that?
And
it was always, no, I don't really remember anything like that. But then recently, and this is the funny thing, recently, because I moved across the country. So I go back home to get my things. And I bring my partner with me, and we're sitting at the table talking to her. And she just randomly says, oh, well, I learned how to make upside down, which is, of course, makluba. So she knew what makluba even meant. And I was so upset in that moment because I thought, I just asked you just a few months ago, did you ever learn any of this? And you said, oh, I don't think so. I don't remember. But now all of a sudden, you know how to make makluba?
Oh my
Why
God,
wouldn't you teach it to me?
I'm really gonna sound like I'm defending your mom, but I'm really not, a promise. You know, sometimes when you get indoctrinated or when you kind of like forget really stuff, you really have to think hard.
Yeah. And I do try to give her that grace. I'm like, maybe she really didn't remember, and all of a sudden
And I'm
she did
really, oh my God,
remember.
listen, don't come for me in any comments,
No,
okay?
no,
I'm
it's
not
okay.
trying to defend, not you, I'm talking to the people. I'm not defending the mother. I'm literally not diminishing any type of Freckles experience. I'm just, trying to be as fair
Fair.
as
We're just being
possible,
fair.
just fair.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
The point is, I'm not in her mind. I really don't know. I can't say for certain that she lied, or intentionally hid things from me. But at the same time, it's like, why did you not prioritize this? It should have been a priority to keep some parts of this rich culture alive for me, even if
Yeah.
you did have a bad experience with my father. That's not Palestine's fault. That's not the fault of the Palestinians. That's his
So,
fault.
if he did something, yeah.
If he did, which I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's a whole different
but
story, right?
I mean, yeah, even looking back through some of the albums that she saved for me, because I will say this, for years, I never touched those albums because it was such a traumatic thing for me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see pictures of him because I associated him with the knot in my stomach. So I never looked at the pictures. And finally, I get to my new home and I'm going through my things and I'm flipping through these pictures with my partner. And he says, there's a picture of my mother standing on a staircase and she's wearing a long garment, like a red garment with some work at the top, some decorative work at the top. And he says, is that a thobe? And I can't say for certain that it is, but it really looks like one.
It
And I
resembles
thought,
one,
oh
yeah.
my goodness, how much of my culture was she exposed to that I didn't even get to participate in? And she just decided on her own, well, this is no. And instead raised me in an Italian American home, which is beautiful as well. But why can't both be honored?
Are you talking to your stepfather?
No, we don't really speak.
Okay.
No.
And how long was your mom with your dad prior to you being born?
I'm not entirely sure. I've tried to get that information from her, but I'm not sure. I don't know when she met him. And I was able to find just through public records, their divorce papers were from the early 90s. So I would say, but she left him long before that because divorces, they can take a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
maybe no more than a few years. But I can't say for certain because I can't get any information from her.
Yeah, but I mean, a few years would be enough time to be exposed to. You cannot be possibly with someone for a couple of years or a few years without being exposed to their culture unless they are totally whitewashed.
Right. Which, listen, I'm looking at pictures of myself as a baby for like my first birthday. I am watermelon out. My whole outfit was like watermelon colors and looked like resembled a watermelon. And, you know, at 15, I wouldn't have any idea what that meant. But now I'm looking at it and I'm like, there it is. There's Palestine, you know, it's there. And yeah, she was with him long enough to know
Yeah,
some things.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it seems like she was kind of like participating, but you know,
Mhm.
there is this thing where people completely shut down when it comes to something that they also don't want to remember,
Yes.
you know, and
Yes.
that's also a thing. And of course, this is absolutely not fair to you because all you're trying to do is figure out who you are. It's not even
Without, right.
right. We didn't even get to the part of your dad yet, of meeting him, but it's just about who am I? Where am I from? What am I?
Yeah.
You know?
What am I? And what does
Yeah.
that mean? You know, is it okay to be proud of who I am?
Are
I think
you?
I was always, yes, so much now. I'm very proud. When people ask, what are you? I say, I'm Palestinian American. I know my Beled now. And that has been really healing for me to feel a sense of pride in, and I'm so grateful to God that he made me Palestinian, you know, that I have that in me as well. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful identity.
110%.
Mm-hmm.
Palestinians are one of the most resilient, if not the most resilient people in the world.
Yes.
I always say that. I always say
Yes. And I
that. And this,
think the things that I got from him, and I got so much from him, I think, in terms of my personality and my
mhm.
passion. And those are the things that my family hated in me most. Those were the things they wanted to grind out of me that they never could. And now they never will.
No, well, clearly it didn't work, but
Mm-mm.
it was so amazing to me, and I really, really, really enjoyed talking to you because this is one of the reasons why I enjoyed talking to you is because it's so crazy to me how much you were able to rebel all of the, you know, evangelical Zionist lifestyle and everything that came with it, because a lot of people in your situation would have been totally whitewashed. And these are the people that don't understand that it's not about necessarily just the looks, you know, like your looks will
Mm-hmm.
never change. And that's why I say no matter how whitewashed you would be, but your looks
Mm-hmm.
would never change. It will always tell its own story. But a lot of people still have a problem with wouldn't accept it. It would be for them still like whatever. They wouldn't even see their own looks being different.
Right. No, and that's the weird experience of being someone who is other than, you know, white Anglo-Saxon or Caucasian or whatever, but being
Mm.
raised to believe you are. It's like this is so off color, but it's true. The Dave Chappelle skit where
Mm.
he's a black man who was born blind and is a member of the KKK. And I hate to say it because it's so embarrassing, but that was me. Like not the Klan part, obviously, but like the part where I'm repeating these Zionist like talking points as a Palestinian American. It's like so embarrassing, but something that I couldn't help because I was born into it. But thank God that I was also born with a very academic mind and have always wanted to absorb ideas and have been open to ideas. That saved me in a lot of ways. A willingness to hear people I disagree with, it changed me.
How did October 7 affect you? When I ask that question, I don't mean, of course, the
Mm-hmm.
babies in Gaza, all the killing and everything that's been going on. I'm talking as considering your story when October 7 happened, how did the aftermath of October
Mm-hmm.
7, I should say, affect you?
It emboldened me even more. Whatever whatever sentiments that I had about or against the state of Israel were solidified, they were cemented, they were deepened, and it affected relationships that I thought were extremely valuable to me. That I still had friends who, yes, they were Zionists, they'd made Aliyah, and they were living there, but these were people that I knew on a personal level, and I loved them. And you don't think about those things, but then after the seventh, you start to listen to the things that people are saying. You really
Mm-hmm.
see what they really believe. And there were people that I loved dearly that were saying horrible things about Palestine and the Palestinian movement and how it's demonic and denying the Nakba. And at that point, I thought, this is who I am. And I'm not willing to compromise that for anyone. I don't care if it's my blood. I don't care if it's people that I shared all of these memories with, because they are rejecting now the very fabric of who I am and of my people. And I'm done. I'm done. And I was done 10 years ago.
But now you're fully done.
But yeah, exactly.
No way
And
back.
so I cut a lot of those people off because I thought, how dare you? How dare you say these things about my people while you're sitting in Jerusalem and you're not even like, you are Caucasian. You are from New York and you have a British passport. How dare you? And that emboldened me to say, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to have to tell someone, I think I'm done with you, especially if it's people you love and if it's family. But those are my principles and they won't change. They won't change for anyone. And if that means that we don't speak again, that's okay. Because I will not ever again make concessions for other people so that they feel comfortable with the version of me that they want. I'm going to be who I am. And if anyone doesn't like it, then they can leave. And that's really what October 7th did for me. It made me bold.
I love it. I love it. And I love it.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say you're still struggling with the most right now, considering your story?
Mm-hmm. Guilt. Guilt. Because I want so badly to know who my father is and to hear his side of the story and to ask him, did you do this? Why? If he did, why? Why did you do this? How do you feel about that now? I want answers from him. I want to know who he is. I want to know how he feels, if he's okay. And I also am at a point now where I want my name back. And it's hard for me because on the one hand, I feel very much that I would be betraying my mother or betraying women who have been through violence and wanting to know him. And I'm not sure that that's fair to myself. And I won't let it inhibit me. I just know that these are the feelings that I have. I feel guilty. But on the other hand, I feel guilty because, in the part of the country that I was raised in, the culture is, someone really loves you if they give you their last name. And my stepfather gave me his last name. And would it make him feel rejected? Would it hurt him? And I know it would hurt him if I changed my name back. But is that the priority? Should I be prioritizing his feelings over mine? That's sort of where I'm at right now.
Okay, so personally, if I may even say my opinion,
of course.
it would be a little bit different, I guess, if it was different circumstances where, like let's say your stepfather came in because your dad left you and he didn't want you, and then all of a sudden your dad comes back and then you change your name. But this is a situation where you didn't even have a chance to meet your dad, or you never got the opportunity or the chance to know the whole story of what happened. Like there's so many even minimalistic information that you don't have about the relationship of your parents. So, and I feel like you have been, because of what you said just a little while ago when you said I'm not gonna be okay with being that version that people want me to be of myself. I'm just gonna be myself and that's it now. And I feel like this is like, if you spent most of your life being somebody that they wanted to be and you felt so much shame and you didn't feel, I understand that feeling of I don't belong here, I'm not like them somehow, but they are my family.
My family, right?
Yeah, and I know I have someone somewhere else, and I'm wondering, am I more like them or am I not more like them? Am I even allowed to think like that? Am I even allowed to think about him? And is it okay for me to like him or be curious? I totally get that. And so I feel like it's time for you to claim back your identity. And if anyone wants to be, is going to be hurt along the way, unfortunately, sometimes it comes with it. We cannot please everyone, but I feel like every human with a heart would understand. And this is not just because you're Palestinian. This is
Mhm.
generally your journey as somebody
Of
who
course.
was someone they're different their whole life.
Hmm.
I feel like this is within your rights to be
Yeah.
yourself, and part of it is your name
Yes, I
that
agree.
they gave you, by the way. You didn't even
Yeah.
choose it. They gave you
They
it.
gave me this name, and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful name, and I'm so proud of it. And spending a life in the shadows and ashamed, I feel like it's something that I need. It will heal a part of me
Go for it.
in a big way. So, and it's also something I think too. I'm like, well, they don't have to know what my legal name is. It's none of their business. How are they
Oh
going
my
to
God.
know?
I hope they're not going to watch this.
That, even if they do, and this was something that I thought about, I was anxious. I'm like, we haven't gotten into these deep nitty-gritty details of how I really feel. What if they hear it and they're upset? And I thought, if I'm going to write a book, this is going to
Hmm.
happen. What am I going to do? Wait till they're all gone and then write the book? I mean, it's absurd, and it's my story. I have a right to tell it.
Let me tell you, 100% you do. I had someone on the podcast and they were talking, it was something completely different, right? Why this person was on a podcast.
Right.
And then she shared that she used to be heavily addicted
Hmm.
on drugs.
Hmm.
And the way that she shared it, it was very touching, but at the same time I didn't expect it. And I was like, okay, so I guess you want me to cut this out because your family. She goes like, no, no, no. I was like, does your family know? I mean, we can cut it. And she goes like, oh, now they know. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, this is important because we have to be free to
Yes.
to bare our throats. That's
Yeah.
that's what stories are medicine, right? I'm reading a book now, Women Who Run with the Wolves, and in this book, the author talks about how stories are medicine, and we have to be free to tell our stories so that we can heal ourselves and heal other people who may be suffering from this exact same sickness and don't even know or can't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
I think like you don't even have to be Palestinian, right? I think about the Yemenite child affair and how so many,
Oh
Yemenite
my
babies were
gosh.
taken from their families when the Yemenite Jews were coming from Yemen to
Yes.
Israel.
Yes.
They were taken from their families and placed in, Ashkenazi homes, white homes.
Yes.
You don't have to be Palestinian to be able to relate to this type of erasure, or it's another kind of displacement, you
And
know?
and this was what I was thinking about on the last episode when we talked, the first one we did, when you were talking about the guy that he wanted, the guy who wanted to be bestie with you,
Yeah.
the Yemeni
Yes.
guy. I was
Yes.
wondering, was he one of those children that grew up in an Ashkenazi home? Because Yemenis people, I mean, okay, I'm Moroccan, I'm pretty pale. That's by default. I don't know what happened there. I guess the European invaders, their genes
They mingled.
somehow were
They
stronger.
mingled.
Yeah. Like whatever. But then again, we have a European Anatolian genetics and as Berbers in North Africa. So yeah. But so I was wondering, is he pretty light? Or
No,
was
no,
he? He
extremely
wasn't.
dark. Yeah, he
So
had
how is he
beautiful,
telling you
beautiful.
then
Mhm.
to cover up? And how is he telling you
This
that?
this is an important part of Israeli society that
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're tapping
Yeah,
into. So
please, please,
I,
please.
I actually stayed with his family, and they are Yemeni, like they are a Yemenite family. His
Wow.
grandmother came over
Mm-hmm.
back, I think it was in the 60s, when all of the Yemenites were coming over. And but they're all Likud members, far, far right. And you see that with a lot of the Mizrahim, the Arab Jews who
Mm-hmm.
come from the East.
Yeah.
And just as I said, the Palestinians that live in 48, not all of them, but a lot of them, some of them do perform to feel accepted and to protect
Yeah.
themselves. I feel the same thing in the Mizrahi community. And he is the perfect example of that. No, I'm a
Yeah.
good Israeli. See, I look like them, but I'm you. I'm one of you. I look like the enemy, quote unquote, but I'm a Jew. I'm a good Jewish person because I am a far right Israeli. It's a performance. And I feel they also struggle with this internalized hatred. And I actually feel pity for him when I think about him. I used to feel anger because how dare you and how dare I let you treat me this way, but also how he treated me is how he feels about himself. And this need to fit into Israeli society, which is very Eurocentric, as a Yemenite man who had very bronze skin, beautiful, beautiful person. You know, physically he was very beautiful, but
Shame.
yeah, yeah, it is. It's very sad. And by the way, something very interesting about him. When I first met him, not long after I met him, rather, he'd hurt his ankle. And it was because he had smashed his ankle with a hammer so that he wouldn't have to go into the military. Yeah. And these
But
things
it
happen
didn't
over
work.
there. No,
Gosh,
they just told him he needed to rest so that it could heal and then he had to
it
go.
wasn't hard enough. Oh God.
No.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, there's a lot of internalized shame. And I recognized it because I also, and isn't that so funny that, you know, we're so different in the eyes of the Israeli state, right? He's Jewish, I'm not. I was Palestinian, he's not. But at the same time, we were more alike than different because we were both struggling with this shame and we were both performing to feel like we were part of the body.
It's extremely, extremely heartbreaking, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel very
Really
much a
heartbreaking.
lot of pity for him. But it's so interesting because while he was this way, his mother was a beautiful woman and was so kind to me. She used to stroke my hair all the time and say, "Beautiful girl." And was so kind to me. And I often wondered, you know, did he tell her what I am? I
Oh,
doubt he
you
did.
never did?
He probably didn't. I think he told them that I was Jewish.
Oh,
But she, you know, maybe not. I'm not totally sure, but she was very kind to me. And so I wonder too if part of his demeanor or his mindset was something that was radicalized in him because of his generation, you know, that generation of Israelis being radicalized, especially when they're in the military, highly radicalized in the military. So when they say, you know, Israel is the most moral army, we care about human lives, well, then why are so many IOF soldiers so radicalized and anti-Arab? Where does that come from?
the radicalization is
Mhm.
what gets me the most is the brutality.
Yeah.
It's the willingness to to be, to do I don't even know how to call it, commit all of these torture acts.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
is what I find so insane, that they are trained to be this way.
Mm-hmm. It's a very brutal. One thing I can say about my time in Sarel was, and not to sound corny, it's just the truth. Such a sunny, vibrant, hot place, but it was so cold. I felt so lonely and so isolated, and it was very cold.
Well, I
Um,
mean, it is impossible to bring a Western country into the
mhm.
Middle East. It's just not.
Oh, of course. Well, and you know, why is West best? There's a lot of things about Western culture that I don't think are perfect and well and great, you know.
Absolutely not. And if anything, what they're showing us is that democracy totally failed. And what they're showing
Right.
us as well is, I never knew. I mean, this is what I always say. You see, people like me, we come to the West, right? Our parents migrate to the West because
Mhm.
they're looking for a better life.
Mhm.
Because the West always keeps saying to us, that's what I grew up with. Yeah, your countries, you only have dictators, you don't have freedom of speech, you don't have
Right.
freedom of expression, you can't do
Women are
this.
battered. Right. Hmm.
Yeah, everyone is strict and you don't have nothing, you're poverty. Over here, at least you can work, you can go to school. Okay, but that's why, when I grew up, I started saying to be stay out of our countries and we wouldn't have to come here.
Right.
It's that simple.
The thing, of course, and that's like the nature of imperialism is that
Yeah,
oftentimes the people who are colonized end up in the heart of the empire. They end up in the country that has colonized them. This is very
exactly.
common.
That's sick.
Right. I know, absolutely. And are treated horribly because they're other, they're the enemy, you know, and it's a monster that kind of eats itself in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but the thing for me was always you brag with all of your standards and with all of the, the good things that you have, and where are they? Because I don't see them. Everybody is
Mhm.
reporting supporting a violent
Mhm.
occupation that is
Mhm.
using torture as a method of keeping
Mhm.
people, under,
Subjugated
yeah. So
under their
I
boot.
don't understand, where is this
Yeah.
democracy? Like,
It's
you lied
and
to
it's
us.
not. And it's not at all. I mean, we see it with the expulsion of the MK's law that Israel has on the books, where it's like, you know, an MK can be thrown out by the majority of parliament if they say any statements or do any activities that are quote unquote deemed a threat to the state. But that could be, it's very broad language and it's enforced broadly. It can be enforced against anyone who says, I don't like living here. It's an apartheid state. That's not freedom of speech. And then we look at, Jerusalem, which is, they Israelis say all of Jerusalem is the capital of the state, right? But only
Mm.
half of the city can vote. There's something like 400,000 people who can't vote because they live in East Jerusalem, which is on the other side of the line. So they're
Yes.
not citizens. Well, then how can you claim that the entirety of the city is the capital? You can't have it both ways.
Well, yeah, exactly. And this
Yeah,
is why, everything that's happening right now is just revealing what has been there for over 70 years.
of course.
And I'm just happy that a lot of people get to see the truth without
Mhm.
even, being convinced of it. You just literally see it. And everybody else who needed some more convincing, that's also fine. But I just really hope that there's still some people that are really, really in a deep sleep.
Yeah,
And
they
I
are.
pray for them that they will wake up,
Same.
because and that for them it's going to be even a worse awakening.
Yes, because imagine the longer you stay asleep, the more atrocities you have to look back on that you supported. Like the mound of atrocities that you were supporting grows bigger with the longer that you're asleep. So I agree
100%.
with you. I agree with you. The longer these people stay indoctrinated and stay asleep, the worse it's going to be when they finally do wake up, because then they have to confront all of these atrocities that people tried to tell them were happening and they refused to see,
I'm
which
switching
is
gear.
painful.
It really is, especially with all the atrocities. Like, there are so many atrocities just in this one year. But if you go even further back, there's way more, and it was not just well documented because there was
Right,
no way to document it in the way that we can now. Oops.
right, right.
um, Switching gear a little bit now, when you say that, you were like, finding yourself even more and more so, and changing name and all of that. Is there
Mm-hmm.
anything else that you do to, and it sounds crazy, so I say quote unquote, become more Palestinian?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
what what do you do?
So one of the reasons that I moved was because I wanted to connect with other Palestinians and with Arab Americans, and so building a sense of community around me, which I have been doing, and I've met so many beautiful people who have been willing to help me look for my father. We've got people, because Palestinian geography. You get one name and they can find out all kinds of information for you. I know someone who
Hopefully,
knows someone.
inshallah.
So, yeah, so that's been a huge part of my journey. And then, some of the friends that I've made have been helping to teach me different Palestinian dishes. I learned how to make kusa and am, learning all the things and different customs and traditions. And I'm also reading Palestinian writers,
Mm-hmm.
more of them. I actually have, they call me a lioness by Ahed Tamimi. So I'll be starting that soon. I have another book, Looking for Palestine, by Najla Saeed. So I'm reading more Palestinian voices and connecting, I think, through more of the creative side, since that's a big part of who I am. Oh, and then
Absolutely.
I'm also like polishing up my Arabic. Um, so, and I'm grateful for having community that I can actually speak with, because there was no one for me to speak with back home. So, yeah, that's just been sort of the way I've been dipping my toes into the pool.
I love it. Do you speak Hebrew?
I do. Yeah, I do. Not obviously not like a native, but I used to be much more fluent than I am now. If you don't use it, you lose it. But yes, I did. I learned Hebrew while I was there. And I also, because I grew up in such a Zionist home and in a
Mm-hmm.
Messianic home, during my very early years, I heard a lot of Hebrew. And so it became very embedded in me. It's easier to pick up on those things when you're young and your brain is younger.
Yeah,
Um, so I already had a foundation of that when I took Ulpan, and I
yeah.
didn't have that with Arabic. So it was more challenging. Arabic was more challenging for me, but I remember thinking like, Arabic is more fun to write in.
Oh,
Script is so
because
beautiful
it's
and it's
right
such a
from to
poetic.
left. It's
Yes,
very,
and like just the letters, like the script
mm,
is really beautiful
yeah.
and it's a poetic language, very deep, rich language. But again, in Israel, I learned Hebrew from an Ashkenazi man who only knew Hebrew, or excuse me, Arabic. I learned it from him. And the only reason he knew Arabic was
Mm.
because his job in the military was in intelligence. So it wasn't a Palestinian teaching us Arabic in the Palestinian dialect, it was an Ashkenazi Israeli. So that's another thing. Israelis know Arabic. They do. They speak Arabic, especially if they worked in intelligence or on borders in the
Mm-hmm.
military. They learn Arabic. Um, and a lot of times you'll see, especially they like to tokenize the Mizrahim,
Yeah,
and they pose on social media as 48 Palestinians and they speak Arabic, but in reality, they're Israeli Jews. And this,
absolutely.
yes, and so this is another reason why I want to speak on these issues, because I
Mm.
want to, in any way I can, be a voice for 48 Palestinians, because we know what happens in the West Bank, we know what happens in Gaza, but a lot of times the Israelis will say, well, yeah, but our Arab citizens, they don't call them Palestinians, our Arab citizens are treated as equals, but this isn't true. And so this is one reason why I also want to talk about this, because they deserve to have a voice as well. Um, while it may not be the same as living in the occupied West Bank, they're not free either.
Oh, absolutely not. Especially
Right.
now, like the aggression on the West
Of
Bank
course.
has multiplied now,
Of
and
course. And, during times of violence like this, the racism against Palestinians is even worse and it is far more dangerous. I know I would get profiled even harder at the airport, when it was during violent times like this, because I was there during Protective Edge and Pillar of Defense.
oh,
And I remember the racism coming out in fuller force. Um, I would go to a bar or a restaurant, and someone sitting next to me would have something to say about the fact that I was obviously not Jewish and I was Palestinian, because it doesn't take them long to figure that out. So yeah, it was a strange experience, a very scary experience. And another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that you go through these checkpoints. Palestinians in the West Bank go through the same checkpoints all the time. So just like I went through Ben Gurion Airport several times, they knew
mm-hmm,
who I was. They know who these people are. They know if you're a threat or not. And
mm-hmm,
sometimes they'll choose to detain you and strip search you or body search you just
yeah,
because they're bored that day. So you're at the mercy of how they feel. Because there were times where I would only have to do the standard 3-4 hours of security, and then there were times where they would take me around the back while they were going through my suitcase and they would body search me, even though I'd been through there I had been living there for 3 years at that time. So, and it's just because they were bored that day, or
yeah.
because
This, yeah,
it's
it's
yeah, or because there's an excursion going on in Gaza. They're bombing Gaza into oblivion, and so they can show their racism more. They can justify it more.
absolutely, and it's just like gives them an excuse to be violent, and that's what I meant earlier. It's just like the willingness to be violent is insane. Just give me a
Yeah,
reason and I do it, and if I
yeah.
want to, I do it without a reason,
Oh,
anyways. You know.
this is the mentality. I
Yeah.
mean, when I was in graduate school, I remember a really good friend of mine, American guy, Christian, was over there in the same program, and
Mm.
we had a birthday party for me one night, and there were Israelis, born and raised Sabras, who were standing in my kitchen, and I will never forget. We were like, "Yeah, Israel kind of seems racist," and they laughed, and they were like, "Yeah." It is. But we're a young country. That's what they say. They excuse it by saying we're a young
Oh,
country, as if in 2014 they didn't know that it was wrong to be racist. They're like, oh, well, we're a young country. We still have room to grow. But they would say all the time, I remember
they do
when
say
that
that
same,
now.
of course, it's like you've been around for nearly 100 years at this point. What do you mean? Like, I don't think that you need more time to know that racism is wrong. But they would say that night, actually, they said this. They were like, yeah, you'll notice that in Israel, if you're Black, you clean toilets and offices. If you're brown, if you're Arab, you drive a cab or you own a kiosk.
They
And
do.
yeah, and if you're Ashkenazi, you work in tech. And
Wow, they
it's true.
have it all figured out, huh?
Oh, yeah. And it's true. Cab drivers were predominantly Arab, Palestinian. The right across from my apartment was a set of offices, and it was in fact an African migrant woman who was cleaning those offices.
Yeah.
The people who bagged my groceries and would bring them to my apartment were from Eritrea, and they blame, especially the African migrants, they blame them for all of the horrific crimes that happen there. Oh, they stab people, they rape women, they're destroying our country. It's disgusting.
100 million%
Mm-hmm.
disgusting.
And are, sterilizing Ethiopian Jewish women against their knowledge and
Yes.
consent, sequestering these people from Africa and African countries into ghettos.
Yeah.
South Tel Aviv is a ghetto, and no one can tell me any different. It's horrible there. They live in horrible conditions, and then Israel has the audacity to tout themselves as a Western first world country. I hate to say first world, but a Western modern country. It's
Yep.
absurd.
100% absurd. It's absolutely this what
Absurd.
I'm saying. It's just like it's just that that when you don't want a person in your life and they force themselves on you, whether you
Mm-hmm.
want to or not,
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of thing. Before we
Yes,
close out, and we definitely have to bring you back. Like I know
of
there's going to be
course.
a lot of questions, but
I'm happy to come back anytime.
absolutely. Thank you for that. I really, really appreciate it. I want to ask you one last question. Do you
Sure.
believe that Palestine will be liberated?
I do. I really do. I don't know when. I don't think it'll happen tomorrow, but I think that what we're seeing in the world today is unlike anything I've ever seen in terms of support, public support for
Mhm.
Palestine. And once the truth is out, it's a house of cards. You pull one card and the whole thing will come down eventually. These empires don't last forever. And there are so many of us, and we are more powerful. Our voices are so powerful, more powerful than we know, and we were seeing it already. But the truth about Israel is out now, and we can't just put it back under the rug. People will not forget this. And I do think that we are going to see a free Palestine. I just don't know when.
100%. I agree with you, and I'm hoping and praying it's going to be sooner rather than later.
Same.
Freckles, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to press stop on the recording now. That's it. That's all you guys get. If anything, leave any comments. Like always, I know you guys gonna have 1,000,001 questions, and Freckles volunteered to come back. So
Absolutely.
definitely make sure that you go back to the first episode if you just happen to stumble across this one here and you've never been here before. Thank you so much for tuning in, wherever you're tuning in from, guys. And yeah, go have a listen and listen again if you have to. Other than that, I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Peace out.